My name is Stella, and until one accidental message, I truly believed my family loved me. That night, I was standing alone in my kitchen, exhausted after a long day, calculating bills I was about to pay their bills, like I always did. Then, my phone buzzed. A video message from my stepmother. I almost ignored it. I thought it was a mistake. A family clip. Something harmless. Instead, I heard laughter. She should be grateful, my stepmother said. Then my father's voice followed. Calm and cruel. A pathetic failure. At least she's useful paying our bills. My hands started shaking. They weren't joking. They were relaxed, comfortable, like this was how they talked about me all the time. 30 seconds later, the video disappeared. Message unsent. But it was too late. They thought I hadn't seen it. And that was the moment everything changed. For most of my adult life, I was the person my family depended on without ever questioning whether it was fair. If a problem involved money, it somehow found its way to me. It didn't matter what time it was or how exhausted I felt. My phone would ring, and I already knew what the conversation would sound like before I answered. My father, Richard, always started the same way, slow, controlled, almost apologetic, but never unsure. Stella, things are a little tight right now, he'd say, as if that explained everything. Just until next month. There was always a next month. Rent that somehow never stabilized. Credit cards that never went down. Utilities that were always unexpectedly higher. And every time, I transferred the money. Quietly. Immediately. Without making a scene. My stepmother, Linda, played a different role. She never asked directly. She sighed instead. You're so responsible, she'd tell me. I wish Evan were more like you. That sentence alone kept me trapped longer than I care to admit. My younger brother, Evan, had been finding himself for nearly a decade. He'd enrolled in college twice and dropped out twice. Each time, I paid the tuition because everyone said the same thing. This time will be different. It never was. Still, I paid. Because if I didn't, Linda would remind me how stressed my father was. Richard would talk about how fragile the family finances were. And Evan, he wouldn't say much at all. He'd just look uncomfortable, like my money was a burden he didn't enjoy, even as he kept taking it. I told myself I was helping, that I was being a good daughter, a good sister. But the truth was, no one ever asked how I was doing. I worked longer hours than anyone else in my family. I skipped vacations because it wasn't the right time. I said no to things. I wanted new clothes, weekend trips, even medical appointments because there was always something more urgent happening in their lives. And somehow, their emergencies always lined up perfectly with my payday. I noticed things, of course. I wasn't blind. Linda would post photos of new furniture. Richard talked casually about dinners out with friends. Evan had a gym membership he never used, paid for with money that had once been mine. But whenever doubt crept in, I crushed it. Don't be dramatic. They're family. You're lucky you can help. That word lucky was used against me constantly. You're lucky you have such a good job, Linda would say. You're lucky you don't have kids yet, Richard added. You're lucky you're strong. Evan shrugged once, like it was a compliment. Strong, responsible, reliable. Those labels felt like praise, but they were really expectations. Chains dressed up as virtue, and I wore them proudly. I never raised my voice. I never demanded explanations. I never asked for repayment. I didn't want to be seen as difficult or ungrateful. I didn't want to risk the fragile approval I thought I had earned. Deep down, I believed that if I just kept proving my worth, if I kept showing up with my wallet open and my mouth shut, eventually they would see me differently. Eventually, they would appreciate me. Eventually, they would love me the way I loved them. I didn't realize that to them my silence wasn't kindness. It was permission. The video arrived on an ordinary night. That was the cruel part. It didn't come during an argument or after a fight. There was no warning, no tension in the air. I was standing in my kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, stirring pasta with one hand while scrolling through my phone with the other. My mind was already on autopilot, calculating how much I needed to send that week. Rent, utilities, Evan's temporary expenses. Then my phone buzzed. A video message from Linda. I frowned at the screen. Linda rarely sent videos. She preferred long, carefully worded texts filled with soft emojis and passive reassurance. For a second, I thought she'd sent the wrong thing. Maybe an old family clip. Maybe something she found funny. I didn't think twice before tapping it. The video was shaky, angled toward a kitchen counter, like someone had set a phone down without realizing it was recording. At first, I couldn't even tell what I was supposed to be watching. Then I heard laughter. Not the polite kind. Not the forced, uncomfortable kind. Real laughter. Relaxed. Cruel. Linda's voice came through first, light and amused. "She really thinks we appreciate her," she said, followed by a short laugh. "She should be grateful." I froze. The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered into the sink, but I barely noticed. My entire body felt suddenly heavy, like gravity had doubled. Then my father's voice joined in. "Grateful?" Richard chuckled. "She'd be nothing without us. A pathetic failure." There was no anger in his tone. No hesitation. Just certainty. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "At least she's good for something," he continued. "Paying our bills." Someone else laughed. "Evan." "She's too soft to say no," he said casually. "Always has been." They all laughed together. I stood there, completely still, my phone trembling in my hand. I kept waiting for the moment where someone would say, "Okay, that's enough," or where the tone would shift and someone would admit it was a joke. It never happened. They weren't whispering. They weren't venting. They were comfortable. This wasn't something said in anger. This was how they talked about me when they felt safe, when they thought I wasn't listening. My name echoed in my head, Stella. They weren't talking about a stranger. They weren't exaggerating for effect. They were talking about me, about the daughter who paid their bills, about the sister who kept their lives afloat. I watched the video until the end without blinking. 30 seconds later, the screen went blank. "This message has been unsent." I stared at the notification, my breath shallow, my hands numb. She realized. Linda had realized what she'd done. For a brief moment, I felt something close to panic. My instincts screamed at me to call her, to confront her, to demand an explanation, to hear her scramble for excuses so I could pretend they mattered. But I didn't. I set my phone down slowly and sank into a chair at the kitchen table. The pasta boiled over, steam filling the room, but I didn't move. The words kept replaying in my head. Pathetic failure. She should be grateful. Too soft to say no. I wanted desperately to believe there was context I was missing. That maybe this was taken out of proportion. That families didn't really think like this about each other. But deep down, I knew the truth. Every ignored boundary, every guilt-filled phone call, every time my needs came last. The video didn't create something new. It confirmed what had been there all along. They thought they'd gotten away with it. I imagined Linda's panic turning into relief as she convinced herself I hadn't watched it. Maybe she reassured everyone later. "Don't worry. Stella didn't see it. She never checks her messages that fast." They still believed I was the same obedient daughter, the same silent safety net. And that realization did something unexpected. It gave me control, because the next payment was coming up. And this time, things were going to be different. The message came the next morning, right on schedule. The sun was barely up, pale light spilling through my curtains as I stood in my kitchen with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. Everything looked the same as it always had: the quiet apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the familiar calm. But I wasn't the same. My phone buzzed. "Linda." "Good morning, sweetheart. I hope you slept well." I stared at the screen. That alone was unusual. Linda never texted just to check in. There was always a purpose. Always a destination she was steering the conversation toward. I waited. Less than 2 minutes later, another message appeared. "Linda. By the way, rent is due tomorrow. Can you send it today?" There it was. No hesitation, no shame, just assumption. I could almost hear her voice, soft, patient, confident that the answer would be yes. It always had been. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Muscle memory already forming the response I'd typed 100 times before. "Of course. No problem. Sorry, I didn't send it sooner." I deleted all of it. My heart was pounding now, loud enough that it drowned out everything else. I reminded myself of the video, of the laughter, of the way they spoke about me when they thought I was invisible. Slowly, deliberately, I typed, "Me. I can't this month." That was it. 4 words. No apology, no explanation. I stared at the message for a full 10 seconds before pressing send. The moment it left my phone, a wave of fear washed over me, sharp and familiar. My chest tightened, and for a split second, I almost grabbed the phone back, ready to fix it, to soften it, to add something reassuring, but I didn't. I set the phone face down on the counter and waited. 1 minute passed. Then 2. My phone buzzed again. Linda, what do you mean you can't? I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch. I had never made her wait before. Not once. The power shift was subtle, but I felt it. Another buzz. Linda. Stella, this is serious. We're counting on you. I didn't respond. Then came a message from my father. Richard, this isn't funny. You know we don't have another option right now. The words hit exactly where they were meant to my sense of responsibility. The familiar pressure wrapped around my chest, urging me to step back into place. I didn't. A few seconds later, Evan joined in. Evan, hey, don't do this. Mom's really stressed. We just need help this one time. One time. I almost laughed. I looked around my apartment at the furniture I'd bought secondhand. The walls I still hadn't painted because it felt unnecessary. The suitcase in the corner that I hadn't used in years. I thought about how many one-times had added up to years of my life. I turned the phone back over. Me. I have unexpected expenses this month. I can't send anything. No apology. No explanation beyond that. The typing bubbles appeared instantly. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Linda was struggling to find the right angle. Linda. Unexpected expenses? What could possibly be more important than your family? There it was. The guilt. The hook. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept my phone on the table and didn't reply. Less than a minute later, another message came through. Linda, your brother has no way to cover rent. If he gets kicked out, that's on you. On you. My jaw clenched. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask what had happened. They didn't even pretend to care. I was a solution. A resource. A problem solver. Nothing more. Then Richard sent another message. Richard, we raised you, Stella. We took care of you when you had nothing. Is this how you repay us? The words stung, even though I knew they were false. When I had nothing, I worked 3 jobs. When I struggled alone. They only noticed me once I became useful. Still, old habits die hard. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, aching to defend myself, to explain, to justify. Instead, I locked my phone. The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable, like a room where everyone was waiting for someone else to speak first. I could almost picture them sitting together, confused, irritated, trying to understand why their usual tactics weren't working. For the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing to fix things. I was letting them sit with the consequences of my absence. And that scared them far more than anger ever could. Because they were beginning to realize something they had never considered before. I wasn't backing down. And I wasn't coming to save them. The silence didn't last long. That afternoon, as I was sitting at my desk pretending to work while my mind replayed every message from the morning, my phone buzzed again. I glanced down, expecting another text. Instead, it was a voice message from Linda. My chest tightened immediately. Linda almost never sent voice messages. When she did, it meant she wanted something words on a screen couldn't force. Tone mattered, emotion mattered, control mattered. I stared at the screen for several seconds, my thumb hovering over the play button. Part of me wanted to delete it without listening. Another part, stronger, calmer, knew I needed to hear it. I needed to know exactly who she was when she stopped pretending. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, sharp and impatient, stripped of the warmth she used so carefully in texts. Stella, listen, she began. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this isn't funny. I closed my eyes. Your father is furious, she continued. Your brother is panicking. You've caused a lot of stress today, and frankly, I don't understand where this attitude is coming from. There it was. Not concern, not confusion, accusation. You have a good job, Linda went on. You make more money than any of us. You don't even need that money. Meanwhile, your family is struggling. Family. She said it like a weapon. And now you just wake up one day and decide you don't care anymore? After everything we've done for you? After all the sacrifices we made? I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't stop the message. You owe them, Stella, she said firmly. They gave you life. They raised you. And this selfish behavior, this isn't who you are. My heart pounded harder now. Not from fear, but from something closer to anger. Controlled. Focused. Then her tone shifted. Colder. If you really want to be this kind of person, she said, lowering her voice. Fine. But don't expect forgiveness. Don't expect to come crawling back when you realize how much you need us. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Once you cross this line, Linda finished, there's no coming back. The message ended. I sat there, phone still in my hand, the room unnaturally quiet. My ears rang slightly, like they always did when something heavy settled into place. I should have felt scared. That was the version of me they were used to, the one who panicked at disapproval, who scrambled to fix things, who apologized just to restore balance. But instead, I felt calm, not relief, not joy, clarity. The voice message hadn't threatened me with loss. It had confirmed something I already knew. They didn't love me. They didn't respect me. They didn't even see me as a person. I was a function, a role, a walking safety net they'd grown dependent on and entitled to. And the moment I stopped performing, the mask slipped. I replayed the message once more, not because I needed to hear it again, but because I wanted to remember it exactly as it was. No softness, no ambiguity, no room for self-doubt later. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the truth, finally spoken out loud. My phone buzzed again, a text from my father. Richard, last chance, Stella. Send the rent. I stared at the words for a long time. Last chance. The phrase echoed in my head, heavy with years of expectation and control. For so long, last chance had terrified me. It meant withdrawal of affection, silence, punishment. Now, it sounded hollow. I thought about the video, the laughter, the ease with which they dismissed me. I thought about every time I'd swallowed my frustration to keep the peace. Every time I'd told myself this is just how family is. I unlocked my phone. Then, slowly, deliberately, I blocked Linda's number. I blocked my father. I blocked Evan, one by one. The screen felt lighter in my hand when I was done. For the first time in years, there was no immediate demand waiting for me. No buzzing, no typing bubbles, no pressure crawling up my spine, just silence. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I thought that was it. I thought that cutting them off would end the confrontation. I was wrong. Because the next morning, just after sunrise, there was a knock on my door, and somehow, before I even looked through the peephole, I already knew who it was. The knock came just after sunrise. Sharp, repetitive, urgent. Not the kind of knock someone used when they were visiting. The kind they used when they believed they had the right to be let in. I stood frozen in my hallway, my phone still face down on the table where I'd left it the night before. For a moment, I considered not answering. I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. Then the knock came again, louder this time. I walked to the door slowly, my heart pounding, every instinct on edge. When I opened it, my suspicion was confirmed. Evan stood there. His hair was uncombed, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscles twitching. He looked like someone who hadn't slept, not from worry, but from panic. Are you serious? He snapped the moment he saw me. What the hell is wrong with you? I didn't invite him in. Good morning, Evan, I said evenly. He scoffed and stepped forward, stopping just short of the doorway. Don't do that. Don't act calm like this isn't a big deal. You blocked everyone. Mom's freaking out, Dad's furious. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. I blocked them because I was done. Done with what? He shot back. Being part of a family? I let out a short, humorless laugh. No, being used. His face twisted. Oh my God, not this again. This again? I repeated quietly. Yes, this victim thing you do, Evan said, throwing his hands up. You act like we're some kind of monsters just because you help out. Help out? I echoed. I've been paying your rent for 3 years. He looked away. I paid your tuition, I continued. Your groceries, your utilities, even your gym membership, which you never use. That's different, he muttered. How? I asked. Explain it to me. He hesitated, then snapped back. Because you can afford it. There it was. The truth, unfiltered. So, because I make more money, I said slowly, I'm obligated to support you forever? That's not what I said. That's exactly what you said. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration spilling out of him. You're blowing this out of proportion. That video wasn't even serious. My chest tightened. I met his eyes. I saw it. His face went pale. What video? He asked too quickly. I smiled, but there was nothing kind about it. The one where you laughed while they called me a pathetic failure. The silence between us was immediate and heavy. Evan swallowed. Look. It wasn't like that. We were just talking. Venting. About me. He shrugged weakly. You weren't supposed to hear it. The words landed harder than anything else he'd said. I wasn't supposed to hear it, I repeated. Yeah, he said, defensive now. You know how Mom gets. She jokes. Dad jokes. It doesn't mean anything. I leaned forward slightly. You laughed. His jaw clenched. So what? You expect us to walk on eggshells because you're sensitive? Sensitive. After everything, I straightened. I'm done paying. The words were calm. Final. Evan stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You don't mean that. I do. You can't just cut us off, he said sharply. You're acting like this money doesn't matter. It matters to you, I replied. Not to me. That's selfish, he snapped. You're selfish. I felt something settle inside me, solid and unmovable. No, I said. I'm choosing myself. His expression darkened. You think you're better than us now? I think I deserve respect. He laughed bitterly. You wouldn't have anything without this family. I stepped aside and gestured toward my apartment. Everything in here? I paid for it. Alone. That shut him up for a second. Then his face hardened. Fine, he said coldly. If you want to be like this, don't expect anyone to forgive you. Don't come crawling back when you realize you're alone. I met his gaze without flinching. I was alone the whole time, I said. I just didn't realize it. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, uncertainty, maybe even shame. Then it vanished. You'll regret this, he said. I nodded once. No. You will. Henever find to the Kevin tuning. Sarit meditaction. Kinkin individer. He turned sharply and walked away without another word. I watched him go, my chest tight but my spine straight. When the door closed behind him, the silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was clean. I leaned against the door and took a deep breath. That should have been the end of it. But families like mine don't let go that easily. Because later that night, my phone buzzed again, a message from my father. And this time, I knew I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. The message from my father came just after dinner. I was sitting on my couch, lights low, the apartment unusually quiet. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't buzzing nonstop, and that alone felt strange. Then it buzzed again. Richard, we raised you, Stella. You don't get to just walk away. You're making a huge mistake. Come back and we'll talk. Talk. I almost laughed. For years, talking meant listening while they explained why their problems were mine to solve. It meant swallowing my instincts and opening my wallet. It meant leaving every conversation feeling smaller than when I entered it. This time, I didn't feel small. I felt focused. Instead of replying, I stood up and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen for a long moment, my fingers resting on the keyboard. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't panicked. I was deliberate. The first thing I did was open my banking app. Scrolling through years of transactions felt surreal. Transfer after transfer. Rent payments. Utility bills. Tuition deposits. Credit card balances paid down. All labeled vaguely help, family, temporary support. Temporary. I opened a spreadsheet and started organizing everything. Dates, amounts, recipients, purpose. The numbers added up faster than I expected. Thousands turned into tens of thousands, tens into more. I felt my throat tighten as I realized just how much of my life I'd poured into keeping theirs afloat. But instead of grief, something steadier took its place. Resolve. I remembered something my therapist once told me during a session I almost canceled because I couldn't afford the time. Boundaries without structure are just wishes. So I gave my boundary structure. I called a lawyer the next morning. I didn't dramatize. I didn't exaggerate. I simply explained the situation, years of financial support, Emotional pressure, escalating demands, and now threats when I stopped. She listened carefully. "What you're describing," she said calmly, "is financial exploitation within a family dynamic. The most important thing right now is documentation and clear communication. Clear, professional, final." That afternoon, I drafted an email. I read it over 3 times before sending it, not to soften it, but to remove any trace of guilt from my words. The subject line was simple: financial support termination. I addressed it to my father, my stepmother, and Evan. Then I wrote, "This message is to formally notify you that I am ending all financial support effective immediately. Attached is a record of the payments I have made over the years. This is not a request for repayment. Any further attempts to contact me regarding money, housing, or expenses will be handled through legal channels. This decision is final." I attached the spreadsheet, every receipt, every transfer, every sacrifice. I hit send. The response was immediate. My phone exploded, with notifications, missed calls, texts, emails, piling up faster than I could read them. I didn't open a single one. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was in control. That evening, I logged into the family group chat, the same one they'd used for years to coordinate emergencies and apply pressure. I scrolled back through the messages. "Can you send it today? We're counting on you. Don't let the family down." My hands were steady as I typed. "Stella, you've talked a lot about what you think you've done for me, but you've ignored what I've given up for you. I'm not your safety net anymore. Don't contact me again." Then I left the chat. The silence afterward felt unreal. No one knocked on my door. No one called from a new number. No dramatic apology arrived. Instead, the panic shifted quietly, behind the scenes. I learned later, through a mutual relative, that things unraveled quickly once my money disappeared. Rent notices, overdue bills, arguments they couldn't smooth over with transfers anymore, but I wasn't there to witness it. I was busy rebuilding. I updated my budget. I scheduled appointments I'd been putting off. I slept through the night without anxiety clawing at my chest. For the first time in years, my life felt like it belonged to me. Late one night, I received a final message from Evan from a number I didn't recognize. "Evan, you didn't have to do this. Family sticks together?" I stared at the screen, then deleted it. "Family doesn't drain you dry and call it love." I closed my laptop, turned off my phone, and stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. They thought cutting them off would break me. They were wrong. It was the moment I finally stood upright. The days after I sent that email were strangely quiet. Too quiet. For years, my life had been measured in notifications, buzzes, calls, urgent messages that demanded my attention before I even had time to think. Silence used to make me anxious. It felt like something was about to go wrong. This time, the silence felt different. It felt earned. At first, I kept waiting for another explosion. A new threat, a surprise visit, some dramatic attempt to pull me back in. But none came. Whatever panic they were experiencing on the other side of my absence, they were dealing with it without me. And that was new. I learned bits and pieces through mutual relatives carefully, from a distance. Rent had gone unpaid. Arguments had erupted where money used to smooth things over. Linda blamed Richard. Richard blamed Evan. Evan blamed everyone but himself. Without me there to absorb the impact, their problems stopped disappearing. For the first time, I wasn't the buffer. Instead of watching their collapse up close, I focused on something unfamiliar, myself. The first thing I noticed was how tired I had been. Not just physically, but emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones when you've spent years bracing for the next demand. Without that constant tension, my body didn't know what to do at first. I slept longer. Sometimes too long. Other times, I woke up early and just lay there, listening to the quiet. No phone buzzing. No guilt waiting for me. I went back to therapy consistently this time. In one session, my therapist asked me a simple question. "What are you afraid will happen if you never speak to them again?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know. I'd spent so long being afraid of losing them that I'd never stopped to ask what I was gaining by keeping them. Space. Peace. A sense of control over my own life. The more time passed, the clearer it became. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They missed what I provided. And without it, they were lost. One afternoon, weeks later, I found an old notebook in the back of a drawer. Inside were lists I'd written years ago. Things I wanted to do someday when life calmed down. Travel. Take a class just because it interested me. Build savings that weren't already spoken for. I laughed softly at how unrealistic those dreams had felt back then. Now, they didn't. I started small. I booked a weekend trip, nothing extravagant. Just a change of scenery. I paid my bills without anxiety, knowing the money stayed where it belonged. I cooked meals without calculating how much I'd have left afterward. Slowly, I began to feel like a person again, not a resource. That didn't mean it was easy. Some nights, guilt crept back in quietly, wearing familiar disguises. What if they're really struggling? What if you're being too harsh? What if this is your fault? But then I remembered the video. The laughter. The comfort in their cruelty. And the guilt lost its power. One evening, I received an email from my father. No subject line. Just a few short sentences. You didn't have to embarrass us like this. Family matters should stay private. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing it without replying. He wasn't apologizing. He was angry that the dynamic had changed. And that told me everything I needed to know. I realized something important during that moment. Closure doesn't always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from understanding. I understood now. They didn't lose a daughter. They lost control. And I didn't lose a family. I lost a burden I'd been carrying alone. As the weeks passed, the fear that once dominated my thoughts began to fade. I stopped flinching when my phone rang. I stopped rehearsing explanations in my head. I stopped waiting for permission to live my own life. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I was healing. And for the first time, that felt like enough. It's strange how freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks. There was no dramatic final confrontation. No tearful apology. No moment where everything suddenly made sense. Freedom came quietly. It showed up in small things like waking up without dread, or checking my bank account without feeling guilty. It appeared in the way my shoulders finally relaxed, in the way my phone could sit untouched for hours without sending my heart racing. For a long time, I believed that walking away meant failure, that cutting off my family meant I was weak, selfish, or ungrateful. I know better now. Walking away didn't mean I stopped caring. It meant I stopped sacrificing myself to prove my worth. I learned that love doesn't demand silence. It doesn't punish boundaries. And it doesn't laugh behind your back while taking from you. What I experienced had a name: financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, control disguised as family loyalty. Naming it didn't make it hurt less, but it made it real. And once something is real, it can be addressed, protected against, and healed. With professional guidance, I put safeguards in place. I changed how I handled communication. I learned that boundaries aren't walls meant to punish others, they're doors you choose when to open. And most importantly, I learned that protecting yourself is not an act of cruelty. It's an act of responsibility. There are days I still think about them. Not with anger, but with clarity. I wonder how long they expected the arrangement to last. I wonder if they ever truly believed I would leave. But those questions don't control me anymore. My life is fuller now, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest. The time, energy, and money I once poured into keeping others afloat now goes into building something real, something stable, something mine. I'm learning what it feels like to live without fear of disappointing people who never intended to see me as anything more than useful. If you're listening to this and seeing yourself in my story, I want you to know something. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not cruel for saying no. And you are not broken for choosing yourself. Family is not defined by who takes from you. It's defined by who respects you when you stop giving. They called me a pathetic failure. But the truth is, the moment I stopped paying for their lives was the moment I finally started living my own. And that choice, quiet, firm, and unapologetic, was the strongest thing I have ever done.